Welcome back to Green Disruptors, Scaling the Future, where we explore the strategies and innovations accelerating climate impact through business. Now, this podcast is brought to you by Mountaintop Social Marketing. We partner with green tech companies to help them in the business of scaling. So today's guest is Ross MacPherson. He's the Residential Codes and Regulatory Affairs Manager at AeroSeal, a company revolutionizing how we seal buildings for energy efficiency. Sounds simple, but the impacts are pretty huge. From cutting emissions to improving builder timelines and lowering project costs, Ross breaks down why airtightness is the next frontier in climate-friendly construction. So let's jump in. We have Ross MacPherson on with us today with AeroSeal. Hi, Ross.
Hey, good afternoon, Megan. How are you?
Good. Tell us your actual title and who you are within the company.
Thank you. My name is Ross MacPherson. I am the Residential Codes and Regulatory Affairs Manager at AeroSeal, which is kind of a all-encompassing phrase for lots of little things that add up to a big thing. So my focus is really in the policy area, building codes, how they're applied, how they're enforced, all those parts and pieces.
Okay, very cool. So to understand what you're doing in your job, tell us more broadly who AeroSeal is and what you do and who you serve.
Yeah, so AeroSeal is an air sealing company, and we have two core products. One is our AeroSeal for ducts, which has been around for 30 years, and many of your listeners are probably familiar with it. And our newer product that's been out for about 8 years is commonly referred to as AeroBarrier, which is for sealing whole building enclosures. So basically, we're trying to improve the built environment and kind of enable that net zero future. So that's kind of the core of what we do.
And who are you most likely? Do you work with residential and commercial?
Yes. So we work with both. On the duct side, it is pretty evenly split between commercial projects, residential projects. The envelope side or AeroBarrier side is more geared towards residential right now, although commercial is quickly gaining pace.
Okay. And what areas do you serve? Like, is it within a local area or how broad is that?
So to date, we have done work in 90 countries, and we have, I think right now, a little over 90% of the U.S. population is within 30 minutes of one of our dealers or locations, and we have about 1,500 across the globe.
So that's not an issue. Location is not an issue. That is good to know. So how long has AeroSeal been around?
So the initial duct sealing technology was created in the mid-90s. And AeroSeal in its current iteration really came about around 2010, 2011. It was owned by a large HVAC manufacturer and really came on the radar of our CEO, Amit Gupta, who recognized its potential and then along with the creator, Dr. Mark Madera, acquired it from this company and created what it is today.
Okay. So I'm curious about marketing positioning. So, how are you helping people to understand what the cost and environmental impacts are of both of these products?
So I think if we talk about the value proposition of why they're using the products, I think that'll explain a lot of what you're asking there. So when I think about the value proposition and what we offer, it really comes down to understanding your clients, understanding their pain points and the challenges you need to solve for them. And it really boils down to kind of three key areas. For us, it's price, schedule, and headache. Price is pretty self-explanatory, just be the most cost efficient. Schedule, it's all about consistency. Whether it's a long time or a short time, consistency matters. Quicker is better. And then headache, most of the builders that we are working with are trying to hit some sort of air tightness target, whether it's duct or building envelope or both. And the testing for those is typically done at the very end of the project. So unless someone is doing testing all along or utilizing a process that tests as part of the sealing, it's kind of an unknown. And you have this lingering tension and stress inside of going, is it going to pass? Is it not going to pass? So those are kind of the three key areas.
Are you able to show before and after very well if that testing isn't implemented at all the stages?
Yeah, it is hard to understand how someone is building if they're trying to evaluate their own process of going, where did I start and where did I end, if you're only looking at the end result. I mean, the end result is what matters for a lot of builders. It checks the box on the code. it gets them their occupancy. But for the ones who care about their process and continuous improvement, knowing where they're starting is definitely a big benefit.
Yeah. So I guess I'm guessing the landscape has changed a lot in the past decade. Like there's probably more city and county regulations for these types of goals. Like give me an overview of what's going on with that and how it's changed.
It is definitely, it varies sometimes down to the town or the county, like you said. Basically, the energy codes are written as a model code. Some of your listeners might be familiar with the International Energy Conservation Code. So those are model codes that are put out there for anybody to adopt and use. And as these states adopt these codes, oftentimes they will amend the code to fit how they want to operate in their state. So, for example, you might have a state like Louisiana, which a couple of years ago implemented the 2021 IECC, which we all thought was great. But then they walked back the envelope tightness from 3 ACH to 7 ACH. So the amendment process is really kind of where the rubber hits the road in terms of tightness and strictness as far as the code is concerned. So a lot of our energy and a lot of my energy is focused on not only tracking what codes are in place where, but what's coming up as far as who's adopting the next code and what can we do to influence that or help clarify why a particular code is better than another.
And that would make sense to focus your marketing efforts on places that you know are going to have to make some upgrades to meet the new regulations. So how do you go, like what's the current state of marketing with you guys? How are you reaching the right businesses?
It's a mix for sure. But in any place where there's a change in the code, there's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to reach out to inform and educate a whole new set of construction professionals who may not have had to deal with tightness of ducts or envelopes and who may never have heard of any of our products or used our products. So those inflection points where code changes are typically where we see the biggest uptick in our adoption.
So to further my question, like do you have door knockers in certain areas? Are you doing meta ads? Like how do you get to those people?
Yeah, so the marketing team would have a much better answer than that for me than I would, but pretty much all the places that you would normally expect to see it with digital tools, whether it's LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook or all of those social media platforms, whether it's geofencing to target communities that have code changes, everything under the sun. We've got a really talented team of folks to try to dial in that message and really enhance and craft the message so it's meaningful for that particular audience.
Yeah. It's not just you have a little subcategories where the messaging is different and what that particular business owner cares about in the moment. So speaking of that, how does either of these products influence energy savings? Like how big can the ROI be and how long is the period before your investment starts paying off?
Kind of taking your last part first. I mean, it's going to depend on the building, the scale of the building, the scale of the before and after. How big is that gap, or in some cases chasm? It can vary widely, but I would say, right now, roughly 40% of the energy we use on the planet goes to buildings, and leaking ducts and leaking building shells, can waste up to half of that energy. So if we can reduce that overall demand, we can cut out a ton of energy generation that we don't necessarily need right now, which has a tremendous impact on emissions and climate. The goals we have to improve our climate, the less generation we have, the easier it is to control, especially when typically the last generation facility and utility turns on is their most costly, and it's also likely their most inefficient and most harmful to the environment. So tamping down on that is the big way that we're addressing it. We have kind of this internal phrase, we want to be a gigacorn. So most of your listeners are probably familiar in the business world. A unicorn is a company with $1 billion valuation. Well, a gigacorn is a company with $1 billion valuation, but also removing a gigaton or 1 billion tons of emissions per year. And we're close.
That's awesome.
So that internally we have that.
Being a gigacorn. You guys better get t-shirts like that, or hats, maybe hats with something. Seems appropriate when you hit that goal. So, I mean, that's interesting though, because, a lot of the times when you're selling to businesses, it is just about showing them the bottom line and the ROI, and they're not making as much an emotional decision. But it sounds like you really are playing into the emissions reductions and all of that as part of your selling proposition. So how are people responding to that? Are people in areas where they're early adopters? Like, how are those conversations going?
It's all over the map. You have some places where that's first and foremost in some people's mind, and some places that it's not. And the great thing about our technologies is that we kind of hit this trifecta of we can improve efficiency, we can improve comfort, health, indoor air quality, and in a lot of cases, we can be competitive with anything else that's out there. So on its own, it can stand without kind of having the tag of a product with a green premium, where it costs more just to be green.
Yeah.
I'll give you a great example. So 2023, we were talking with one of the top 10 builders in the U.S. doing a house development in Texas. And they were looking to see if we could help them achieve their goals. And we partnered with their HERS rater, who's kind of an energy consultant and does a lot of the compliance work for these projects across the country. And we did some proof of concept energy modeling where we tightened the building envelope. And prior to that, I'll take a quick step in time. As a HERS rater, which I was and still technically have a certification for, when we model a project pre-construction, initially we kind of want to make sure that we hit all the boxes we need to check and get the project across the line according to its programmatic needs, but there's certain things we don't want to go too far on. So prior to AeroSeal and AeroBarrier being adopted, duct leakage and envelope leakage were kind of at the highest limit they could be while still maintaining code compliance. But now that we have the ability to kind of pull those levers where we didn't before, it opens up a whole lot of trade-offs. So for this development in Texas, they had 2x4 exterior walls and an R3 exterior insulation. And that's not a lot of exterior. It's like half inch, maybe a little less. And what we found was that if we took the envelope tighter, we could more than offset the efficiency gains from that exterior insulation. So we made the building more efficient by tightening it and removing that, and had a side benefit of the AeroBarrier was about $500 less than the envelope insulation, and saved them a net day and a half. The other cool thing is, since we made it more efficient, it now qualified for Energy Star, which in Texas got them a pathway to code compliance and a $2,500 federal tax credit. So when you add up a day and a half and $1,000 a house over a 4,000 house development, that's some real time and real money. It didn't cost, it actually saved them money to make a better house. So it doesn't have to cost more. It just needs somebody to look at the full picture and figure out, is this the best recipe to put this house together?
And it sounds to me like maybe if your businesses want, or you as a homeowner are wanting to do something that's going to make an impact, maybe you don't need to go straight to solar panels. You could do this first, and that'll start making an impact. And obviously, if you can invest in that more high cost energy sources later on, then that's great too. But this could be a first, like, well, hey, this is an easy thing we can get done for not as much cost.
For sure, especially on the duct side, because it's very easy to retrofit. We actually partner with a number of solar installers who will do the duct installs as well, because it reduces the amount of solar panels they have to put on the roof.
It needs to put it, okay, yeah.
Or a situation where the roof may not be able to handle all the solar that it needs to be truly net zero. If we can reduce the demand of that individual unit, we can increase the amount of roof space we have for solar.
I love that partnership model, when you can kill two birds with one stone again.
Yeah.
So back to the what'd you call it? The Gigacorn?
Yes.
So what is next in terms of getting to that benchmark, and as far as scaling goes? Like, obviously you've got a huge market presence, you've got great products, you've got a strong marketing effort. What do you see is a bottleneck right now?
So for us, when we look at how to increase our adoption, it really comes down to who's doing the construction. If you look at 2024, 1 out of every 5 single-family new homes was built by one of 3 builders: DR, Horton, Lennar, and Pulte. And that's just the top 3 by volume. So it was really clear to us that these production builders are kind of the key to that massive growth. And when we started having conversations with them, they really honed in on things that were important to them. We can show them that we can save them money and shorten their schedule and all of that. But for them, the things that were important to them along with that were a consistent experience across, in some cases, 90 different divisions across the US, predictable pricing, and kind of essentially one throat to choke. And so as we look at delivering on that expectation, the model we started experimenting with and moving forward with was one where we would approach some of our largest and most ambitious independent dealers and explore an acquisition where we could then support from a capitally intense place their growth to be able to serve these big builders. If you're trying to do a development with 4,000 houses a year, that can be 4 or 5 different trucks and crews for that one. So being able to scale quickly, that model has seemed to work for us really well. And right now we've got about 12, corporately owned locations in the US and Canada, another in the UK and some in the Middle East. But that method has been really key to satisfying the expectations of these production builders that are key to our future growth.
Well, it just sounds like, hey, let us test you.
Right.
I didn't say that well, but that makes sense. And that's a problem that you could only have too at this level of scale. So that's interesting to hear.
Yeah, it's been really successful for us. And a lot of these builders, we're only scratching the surface with what we're doing with them. And as we continue to add divisions, in the last few years, we've essentially been doubling every year. So from a growth perspective, it's been really encouraging to see that pickup, especially from production builders who are not necessarily in this just to be green. Now, to be said, there are some. Beazer Homes is a great example. They want their product to be net zero across the board. But not every production builder has that ethos. Yeah. So for them to be adopting it, it generally means that it's the most effective, efficient way to hit their goal. Yeah.
That makes sense. Is there anything that would be useful for you to highlight that the company has coming up in the next month or quarter that we'd be interested to hear?
We're always innovating and developing, whether it's trying to make our products lighter, faster, more efficient. So we're constantly doing that with our existing products. We're working on some things to the future. The piece about innovation has really been key, because if I take a step back 5-6 years when I was a dealer. So my backstory real quick. I was a builder until about 2014 and became an energy rater. And then I saw it on an aero barrier on this old house in January 2019. And 2 weeks later, I had signed paperwork and sent a check to become a dealer. Very cool. And back in 2019, I was charging around $1.50 a square foot. And today, the national average is much less than $1. And part of that's a function of scale, because we're getting enough customers to do multiple jobs in a day. And if we can say, okay, I've got a daily cost for my crew and my equipment and all that, if we can spread that out over multiple jobs, it makes it...
It's more efficient.
It's more efficient, and we can charge a lower price and still make enough to keep it going. So the efficiency and constant improvement of the technology has been a big focus for us. So I would say there's not anything new and fancy coming out the door in the next quarter. Definitely keep your eyes out for the next year. But I would say that constant improvement, inward-looking approach to keep making it better has been a real key to what we've done.
I think that's a great parallel, because what you're doing is making buildings more efficient, reducing emissions, and when a business itself can operate more efficiently, you have the ability to scale. And in these businesses related to climate, it's like your own efficiency is having a climate impact. So It's a great analogy.
It really is a cool story. And I'm not aware of any other construction material or process that has come down in price over the last 5 years. So that's kind of a cool thing to say.
Let's not mention lumber prices in 2022. Right? Yeah, it's true. Well, very cool. This is really encouraging to hear, and I'm glad that things are going so well in the scaling process. I'm sure it's a lot of moving parts all the time. So I'm glad that they have people like you to help do what you do best.
Thanks. No, it's really exciting to be a part of. And when you think about, big goals and big problems to tackle, especially in efficiency. Changing somebody's habits or their lifestyle is very difficult. I know I've tried to lose a few pounds here or there or use some less electricity, and that's a really difficult thing to maintain. And the cool thing about these products is we don't really have to change anyone's lifestyle. This can be a really passive approach to just improve the baseline efficiency without having somebody make a choice of broccoli or ice cream. It's just kind of, we're just making everything a little bit better, and they can operate however they want to operate.
Yeah. That's funny. My husband and I have been married for almost 14 years, and from day one, I've been trying to get him to use reusable bags when he goes to the grocery store. He just won't unless I literally put it in his hand. And even then, sometimes he still just forgets. So
Change
yeah,
is hard.
But we bought a house that has solar panels. There you go. He doesn't have to do anything. So yeah, it's frustrating how hard it is as humans to make those decisions and make change. So really, like with any business or climate plan, you kind of have to work with what you got. Like, this is how humans are. How can we implement something that's going to work regardless of that?
Right. And it's one time frustrating and other times really rewarding, because HVAC distribution and envelope tightness and indoor air quality, they're not the sexy things that sell a house. They're not the granite countertops or the fancy tile. So it's hard to get people to emotionally invest in those things. But at the same time, it's also not on their radar first and foremost. So to make a tweak, it doesn't have the emotional impact of, say, changing a countertop or doing something else that's very much in their face. But they will notice the difference, especially with comfort and indoor air quality, once we have addressed those things.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to end on. So thank you. This has been a fun conversation, and look forward to hearing more about what's going to happen in the next year.
Thank you very much for having me, and I'm happy to come back and tell you in a year. Great.
Sounds good. It's a plan. Big thank you to Ross for joining us and sharing AeroSeal's impressive story, from their Gigacorn level climate goals to saving builders time, money, and emissions at scale. If you're in the building or climate tech world, I hope you're walking away with fresh ideas on how to grow smarter and greener. Be sure to subscribe and share this episode with someone who might be interested. And remember, when it comes to sustainability, especially the invisible work matters. We'll see you next time.